everybody for singing. Okay, now is the special time in our program when we have our speaker, and this morning, as I said earlier, it's McConahey. So it's just wonderful to have you here, Meg. What can I say? I know you've been waiting to do this for a long time, and I'm sure she's a little bit nervous, but don't worry, it's no big deal. You know more than we know, so right? Anyway, her message is From Wilderness to the Promised Land. Thank you, Meg.
So it's comforting to look out and see so many friends out here and people I just love. You're some of my favorite people in the world. So I'm just so grateful for you all, and thank you. So I wanted to start by just kind of telling you a little story, a little anecdote. A few years ago, a friend and I decided to take a trip to England, and our mission was to follow in the footsteps of Jane Austen. We both had been lit majors, and my friend Sharon, she really had wanted for years to do this and go to the sites where Jane had written and where she'd lived. And I just love everything literary. So we planned out all this trip and all the stops that we were going to make and places that we were going to go. But then after planning it all out and thinking we were going to, of course, go on the train, because trains go everywhere in England, right? No, they don't. And we realized that we just were not going to be able to go to all the places that we wanted to in the time that we had allotted. And we were going to have to drive. So yeah, if any of you have driven in England, you know. You know. It could be terrifying. It's not just that you're driving on the left. That's just almost in the way of the least of it, although that's hard. But virtually all the intersections are these roundabouts, and you enter them and there's multiple lanes, and people are, entering them at all times and exiting them at all times, and you're looking at these signs and trying to, do I leave at 10 o'clock or do I leave at 2 o'clock? And it's really scary, and you have to decide it in a nanosecond, or you just keep going around, and you don't want to sideswipe somebody. It's really scary. But then the other thing that's really scary is that the roads are super narrow. So these little, roads were designed for horses like hundreds of years ago. And so you've got like these stone walls or brick walls on either side. And maybe if you're lucky to have some kind of shoulder, it's really slim. And there's cars parked in the middle of the lane because there's nowhere to park. And there's vans stopped delivering things, and there's bicycles going by, and people in all directions, and you're on the left. And so it's a terrifying situation. And you have the feeling as you're driving that you're just going to hit someone or scrape against something. And it really was scaring the bejesus out of us. So when we realized how hard it was going to be, we just looked at each other and we moaned. How are we possibly going to do this? And at one point, my friend Sharon, she just turned to me and she pulled out this quote in her head that she had heard somewhere. I think she thought it was from Jane Austen, but it actually wasn't. It was from this woman, a podcaster and a writer named Glennon Doyle. But it was so simple, but it was just so perfect for the moment. She said, sometimes you just have to do it scared. And there was something about those plain words that just gave us both the courage to drive through our fears and just do it. And we really didn't have any choice if we wanted to have the trip that we had long planned. And I really think those words repeated often just got us through England without an accident or having a heart attack or, hating each other. So every now and then when I'm afraid to do something, I'm dreading, kind of like today. And no, I have to do it. I summon those words. Don't wait for the storm to pass. Just head out into the headwinds, and you do it scared. And I'll be honest, I've been repeating those words this morning and for a few days because I'm not an experienced public speaker. In fact, I've spent my whole life avoiding speaking publicly. When I was a little girl, I used to hide And people were always having to go look for me, like I might be in the hamper or under the bed or in the cloak closet. I remember one teacher like looking angrily down at me because he couldn't find me and I was behind a bookcase, always with a book. And I became a journalist, so I could kind of like hide myself behind my notebook, and I could kind of recede and just write about other people and talk to them about their lives, which I really enjoyed, but I didn't make it about me. And occasionally, even when I was asked to maybe speak somewhere, I'd always make excuses and decline, which was like really different from my sister, who she's a journalist like me, but she chose to be on TV. She's really outgoing, so we're really different. Have the same interests but different personalities. So, but I really wasn't shining my inner light. And a lot of you may be aware of that parable of Jesus. It's in Matthew 5:14-15. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. So, really thinking about that, we must not hide and hoard ourselves, for it's the beams of ourselves and millions of people all over the world that light the way for all of us. So some years back, I set out on a quest to better understand myself and the teachings of unity and to just really apply them in my own life and to become more aligned with my spiritual source. And I started taking classes through Unity Institute. They're called Spiritual Education Enrichment classes. Maybe some of you have taken one. They're really wonderful, and you can take them online, Zoom now. And there's a whole vast menu of them. But I kept taking them one after another after another. I traveled all over. I went to Unity Village, Maryland, Arizona, San Francisco to take these classes because I started before Zoom. And when the pandemic thrust us all into Zoom, then I took classes with ministers and then with teachers that were all over the country. In Houston, Bend, Oregon, Florida, I studied, with people everywhere, practically every state, including Canada. Class after class, 26 of them. And that was just the requirements to apply to the teacher training program. So in addition to yet more classes, I had this practicum, which is a whole menu of things I need to do within my church community around pastoral work and leadership. So after a nudging from Reverend Patricia, I'm here this morning doing something that scares me. My first Sunday's talk. And it's really actually my first talk since a college class in public speaking that I had to take in order to graduate. But I'm here among dear friends, and you've all been very supportive, and we're all here together, and it's not about a show or performing or anything. We're all just kindred spirits here in our quest for a deeper understanding of our spiritual selves. So however different the circumstances of our lives, there are so many things that we do have in common, and probably the biggest one is change and transition. So I'd like to talk a little bit about transitions, because every human being experiences them. You don't get out of this earthly plane without experiencing change, and over and over again, literally in every stage of our life, and until that final transition from being a spiritual being, having a human experience, to everlasting life and that divine consciousness from which we all came. Sometimes we choose to do the hard things and make change happen, like leaving a toxic situation, and maybe a bad marriage or a job that's making us sick. A lot of times, though, we don't have any control at all. We're forced into change. We get laid off, or we lose our money in a recession. Maybe we undergo a serious illness or an injury. Maybe an important person to us dies, and maybe a partner leaves us. And it just doesn't diminish with age. Even as we age, we may have to move, downsize, leave a long-time home we've loved, go into assisted living, or maybe we have to give up driving or let go of a hobby or maybe some sport we love doing because our body no longer permits it. And we're called up to find new ways of living and being and seeing ourselves. And that can be extremely hard. You all know that, right? I think of the actress and singer Julie Andrews, who had this crystalline voice. It was an extraordinary 4-octave range and a perfect pitch. She went in when she was in her early 60s to go in for like what was described to her as like would be a very easy routine surgery on her vocal cords had become weak. And she came out of surgery unable to sing. Doctors had botched the procedure and destroyed like one of the most beautiful voices in the world. I mean, it was tragic. And for a woman who had seen her singing voice as like this extension of herself, her whole identity, it was the thing that made her a star, like musicals like The Sound of Music. The loss was just devastating. And she fell into a deep depression and crying uncontrollably. She was thrown into what Robert Brummett, who's a beloved Unity writer and teacher, calls the void. And I bet every one of us here has been in the void at some point. Brummett wrote this powerful and important little book about change, and it's called Finding Yourself in Transition, Using Life's Changes for Spiritual Awakening. And Brummett reminds us that every change in our life is like a kind of death. And so many people, like, we fear death, right? And inevitably, with a great loss or death comes grief. And so we might find ourselves in the wilderness, like Moses and the Israelites after freeing the oppression in the book of Exodus. And they found themselves wrestling with faith to survive, living on manna from heaven. That was a metaphorical, spiritual bread. But you know, change isn't all tragic. And however painful, change can be a call to growth. We can choose to bypass our grief by numbing our feelings. You could take drugs or, you know, food, alcohol, mindless distractions, other addictions, scrolling through our phone, whatever. But we can also lean into it and open our hearts and hold on to our faith that even though we may not know where we're going or how long we're going to be wandering in that void or in that place after that one door closes and the other one hasn't opened yet, we know that we can find our way eventually to a new way of living. We will get there, but we just have to do it scared sometimes. Now, the motivational coach, Brian Tracy, says, resolve to be a master of change rather than a victim of change. So, in other words, you can't control what happens to you, but you can control your attitude about what happens to you. And which is in alignment with our third unity principle, right? They often call it the law of mind action. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. So how we perceive our lives and our worlds and other people depends on the thoughts we hold. So when something happens that forces change, don't think of yourself as a broken person. You're not broken. But you may be broken open. And into this opening is a new awareness and insights that can bring this breathtaking transformation that would not have happened had that crack never occurred. We might have just remained stuck within our shell, you know, like a caterpillar that never bothers to leave the chrysalis. So Robert Brummett beautifully breaks down this process in Finding Yourself in Transition. And if you'd like to explore, you know, this more in depth, I'd really love for you to join me in a book study class that I'm going to be holding. It's about 5 weeks, maybe, you know, meeting for about an hour or so. where we can really take more of a deeper dive into Brumit's teachings about this, maybe share experiences with one another, have some exercises and prayer and meditation, as we examine maybe the changes that we've already been in our lives, looking back on them, maybe helping through some experience we're having now, or we know maybe a change is coming in the future, and we want to be better prepared and understand what's going to happen. So Brumit defines transition as a threefold process, and it begins with an ending, followed by a period when you're in a void, this feeling of emptiness, or like you're just like unmoored, like you're wandering in the wilderness until eventually there's a new beginning. This door opens, some path materializes through the wilderness, it emerges through the fog. It's kind of like, you remember the hero's journey in mythology? The hero embarks, on this difficult adventure. He's got some task to do, a dragon to slay, counters tests and trials along the way, and, experience maybe danger and doubts, and eventually comes out of it strong and transformed. And, the one that's played out in the book of Exodus, where Moses is called to lead the Israelites out of enslavement. He parts the Red Sea and leads them to safety from the clutches of the Egyptian army, right? No, that was just the beginning. They would spend 40 years in the wilderness. And that was a time where they faltered, and there were failures of faith, before they would reach the promised land. So transformation is also, it's a rite of passage. Think of the Apostle Paul, who was a persecutor of Christians. Remember Paul, the story, of how he encountered that vision of a resurrected Jesus on the road to Damascus, and he had this major conversion, and he perhaps becoming the greatest missionary of the message of Jesus of all time. But, remember, for this to happen, something has to end. Something must be lost or released. And endings can be scary. As humans, we seek meaning for our lives, and these meanings give us a feeling of order and safety amid chaos. So when something happens to force change, we lose that order. That belief system just may crumble, and we feel without a foundation, and we're adrift. What we thought we believed is maybe no longer so. What we held on to is no longer there. It's a paradigm shift. And if we're courageous enough to just enter the void, we're going to find it's going to be a messy place. It's not linear. We go in without clarity. There's no map, there's no compass through it. The Spanish poet and priest John the Cross writes of this in his poem, The Dark Night of the Soul. And some of you may have heard that phrase. It's kind of an idea that's been seized upon by other writers and philosophers. As Joseph Campbell put it pretty aptly, the dark night of the soul comes just before revelation. When everything is lost and all seems darkness, then comes the new life and all that is needed. So can you think of a time in your life when you experienced a dark night of the soul? I believe some of you may relate to one of my experiences in the wilderness. When I first walked into this church 13 years ago, I was really deep in the dark. And I know a lot of people come here feeling in the dark. And I was feeling this powerful, powerful need to grow, to change how I was living and thinking and how I was showing up in the world. It was just like pushing at the insides of me. But I knew I couldn't do it married to the person I'd been married to for 30 years. And some of you have been through that, and that's really hard. And we just, we're growing differently and further apart. And I just knew if I stayed, I risked remaining stuck and taking the path of least resistance, maybe keeping my light under that bushel by rejecting change. But I was really looking for the courage and a way out. And, but it was frightening. I was in midlife, and I was afraid of the consequences of walking away from everything that was familiar in my community and, this whole life. And it was comfortable, but it wasn't really fulfilling. It was no longer fulfilling. My mother had taken me to a Unity church in Walnut Creek. Don't know if you've ever been to that one, when I was a teenager. So I was really familiar with Unity, and I, as a very young person, read Catherine Ponder and Eric Butterworth and other, great Unity thinkers. And those teachings got me through some dark nights in my younger life. But, I drifted away from it, gotten out of practice. And it wasn't that I stopped believing, but, my husband wasn't into it. And Sundays were the only day that we had together as a family, so I wasn't coming to church. And years turned into a few decades until I found my way to Unity of Santa Rosa on a New Year's burning bowl ceremony, which is really powerful. And I sat here in this room crying, knowing I needed to do something scary. That day, I was broken open. I might have come in feeling broken, but instead I was broken open. And I'd find the tools here and the inspiration here, and obviously, of course, within, because that's where it all begins, to leave my old life and just start a new one, which led me to those slow years of spiritual classes and incorporating the truths I was learning into practice, living by them, until I was transformed. And I know that I am a much calmer, I'm a more confident person. And I've just come to experience a really deep inner peace that I did not know, and probably would not have known if I hadn't forced that ending, if I'd not had the guts to do something that scared the heck out of me. So there are many stories of people who, either by choice or faith, they faced a loss and came out of their transition. They did. Transformed. I have a close friend whose husband took his life 4 years ago, and I walked through that dark tunnel of grief with her. And she turned over every stone, trying to understand the incomprehensible, wrestling with this, whole many, many emotions, and from grief to sadness, and just riding these waves of grief and reordering a life ultimately that had been built around herself as just being part of this great couple. But I can say through it all, and she would say this too, that she's a changed person. She's a far more empathetic person. She's created new friendships and has taken up cooking and painting and meditation. She was like this high-powered researcher, Harvard researcher, and very much into her work. And now she's just finding this fulfillment in these things that, not that she would not wish her husband back, but given that happened, she found another way of living. She reordered her life and into a beautiful life that she's enjoying now. I think back to Julie Andrews, just now in her early 90s, I think. She recalled after losing her voice, she turned to her daughter, Emma, and asked, what am I going to do now? And Emma turned to her and said, Mom, you simply have to find a new voice. And she did find it. She found it through writing. With her daughter, she's written more than 30 children's books, and then she wrote, I think it was a bestseller, her own memoir. And she's continuing acting. She's a great actress and directing. And of her new career as a writer, she said, boy, that was a lovely surprise. So there'll always be change. Sometimes those dark nights are darker than other times. And sometimes we wander longer than at other times. Clarity, new ideas, new ways of being and thinking, they unfold in different ways. But, it helps to understand it as a process and as an invitation to growth. The Buddhist nun Pema Chodron, many of you may have read her wonderful books, but she wrote, things falling apart is a kind of testing and also a kind of healing. We think that the point is to pass the test or to overcome the problem. But the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together and then they fall apart. And then they come together and they fall apart again. And it's just like that. The healing comes from letting there be room for all of that to happen. Room for grief, for relief, for misery, and for joy. I love poetry, and how it translates into vivid words, our inner experience. So I want to leave you with one. This one's called For a New Beginning by John O'Donohue. And that speaks to my own inner yearning, that dark night that led me here. In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you are ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? And then the delight when your courage kindled and out of you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning. That is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. So I want to invite you to join me in a little taking that into meditation. And maybe we could turn down the lights a little bit. And just relax in your chairs. And I invite you to just take your awareness to your heart center and visualize yourself stepping into your light within. And just breathe this beautiful light into your lungs. Breathe in deep and slow. Deep and slow. Taking your awareness deeper within. Allow your awareness to settle, noticing yourself becoming the observer within. Allow yourself to watch as you breathe this beautiful light into your lungs. And observe your breath as it flows. And with each breath, be aware of that peace that's settling within you. With each breath, just sense this light filling your body, this with spectacular healing energy. And sense it expanding outward, merging into the energy field of this room, into the energy of all of the beings here. Now set the intention that you're opening up your heart so that you may serve your greatest and highest good. And let this be your intention for the month. Be aware of any change that is occurring in your life, either in process or in your field of view in the future. Release any judgment or fear and lean into the process. whether it's recognizing an ending and blessing it or looking into the void. Know you're safe. Let your inner spirit, the loving God spirit, your Moses, be your guide. And from this inner heart-centered and peaceful place of pure light, direct your focus to your higher, wiser self. And ask yourself this question: where should I direct my energy for my greatest and highest good? Allow any thoughts, images, or words, phrases to ease your awareness in whatever form. Just welcome them as they present themselves. Just allow it the time to unfold naturally. Allow yourself to gain an understanding of what is being presented to you through your higher awareness. And focus on this information as you bring it more and more into awareness. And bring your new attention alive by experiencing it on every level of your awareness. Sense it in as many ways as possible. Imagine it becoming part of your reality. What new experiences does it bring to your life? How will it enhance your life for the better? How does it change your life? And so when you feel clear about your intention, identify a powerful affirmation, one that supports your new beginning, and state it to yourself in the present tense and positive light. Breathe light and life into it and witness it taking form in your energy. Sense as you begin to resonate more and more with the frequency of your intention. And then breathe light into your intention and project it out into the world as you state aloud your affirmation in your mind. So let's take this for a moment into the silence, the void, opening your heart to the wisdom of your higher and wiser self. So breathe light into that which you need to release. Give thanks for the lesson and growth, and surrender this to your higher and wiser self. Visualize the energy frequency of what you need to release, falling away and just being dissolved in light. And acknowledge as you release the old, you can now make way for the new beginnings and your new intentions. So now slowly and gently bring your awareness back into this room and feeling your intention taking root in your heart space, knowing you're going to leave here today open to receiving whatever gifts, whatever changes come about. Receive the gifts that materialize in this open and heart-centered space, and just experience them at every level of your being as you fully embrace the energy of a new beginning and say, thank you, God. And so it is.